The long winter inside the walls. Before we begin, if you enjoy these late night winter stories, please consider liking and subscribing. Now, listen. Winter did not arrive suddenly in the Middle Ages. It announced itself slowly, the way something serious always did. First, the mornings grew sharper. Breath began to show before words did. Water left unattended overnight formed the skin of ice thin, enough to break with a finger, thick enough to warn. Then the days shortened, not dramatically, but persistently, until light itself felt like a visitor rather than a resident. People noticed these things long before snow fell. In the town of Brackenford, the first sign was the smoke. By late autumn, chimneys no longer rested. Smoke rose at all hours, thin in the morning, heavy by evening, curling above the rooftops like a shared breath. Fire became the center of everything. Not comfort, survival. Inside the stone houses near the wall, hearths were rebuilt and repaired. Old mortar was scraped away. New clay pressed into cracks. A hearth that leaked heat was worse than useless. It stole warmth while pretending to give it. Families tested their fires carefully, watching how smoke moved, how heat traveled. You learned these things not from books, but from winters that had already taken people. Wood was stacked everywhere, against walls, under benches, above door frames. Not all wood was equal. Oak burned slow and hot, saved for deepest cold. Birch caught quickly but vanished fast. Good for starting fires or warming hands in the early morning. Peat, where it could be found, smoked endlessly and smelled of earth, but it lasted. In poorer homes, dried animal dung was used when wood ran thin. It was not spoken of politely, but it was spoken of honestly. Inside the houses, furniture moved. Beds were dragged closer to hearths. Tables turned to block drafts. Tapestries, once decoration, became insulation. Walls were covered with cloth, wool. Old cloaks no longer fit for the road. Stone held cold the way bone held pain. You learned to fight it with layers. People dressed differently indoors. Linen stayed close to the skin. Wool went over it. Sometimes 2 layers, sometimes 3. Belts tightened not for fashion, but to trap warmth. Sleeves were tied at the wrist to stop cold air from climbing the arms. Even inside, no one was truly uncovered. At night, families slept together. Not always because of love, because bodies were warm. Children slept between parents. The elderly were placed closest to fire. Blankets were shared, patched, layered until weight itself became warmth. Hot stones from the hearth were wrapped in cloth and placed at the feet of beds. Sometimes they burned, sometimes they cracked, but they were better than nothing. In the Lord's hall above the town, things were different, but not easier. The great hall was vast, built for display, not warmth. Fires burned in open hearths, large enough to roast whole animals, yet the heat barely reached the walls. Smoke drifted upward and escaped through vents in the roof, taking much of the warmth with it. Tapestries hung thick along the stone, not only to show victories and lineage, but to slow the cold creeping inward. The Lord wore fur indoors, so did his guests. Not always expensive fur, sometimes rabbit, sometimes fox. Whatever held heat. Wealth brought fuel and labor, not immunity. Even kings felt winter. They just endured it with more witnesses. In monasteries, the cold was accepted. Monks rose before dawn, breath fogging in the air as they prayed in unheated chapels. Fire was reserved for specific rooms. The infirmary, the kitchen, sometimes a scriptorium. Cold was considered instructive. It taught discipline. It reminded the body of humility. Hands stiffened while writing. Ink thickened. Pages cracked if handled too quickly. Scribes warmed fingers over candles, careful not to scorch parchment. A dropped candle could mean fire. Fire meant death. Every source of warmth was also a danger. In towns, fire spread faster in winter. Dry beams, crowded houses. A single spark could erase a street. Night watches increased. Bells stood ready. Buckets were kept filled, not with water alone, but with sand, which smothered flames better in freezing weather. And yet, people still gathered around fire. Stories were told there. Not grand tales of heroes, but quiet things. Memories, rumors, what winter had taken before. Who survived it last year? Who would not this year? Heat created community. Cold isolated. Those who lived alone suffered most. Old windows, travelers, the poor. Sometimes the town opened a communal hall. During the harshest nights, fires burned continuously. People slept shoulder to shoulder on straw. Pride dissolved quickly when fingers stopped responding. No one slept deeply in winter. You woke to feed the fire. You woke because cold crept back. You woke because silence felt wrong. Winter was not something you escaped. It was something you negotiated with. And every night, by every hearth, the same unspoken question lingered. Will this fire last until morning?